Imagine this. You wake up in the morning, open your eyes, and even before getting out of bed, you already feel that pressure in your chest. A tiredness you can't explain. A sense of walking against the wind every single day. Sounds familiar? It's as if we're always trying to reach something that never arrives. An ideal state of peace, productivity, self-love. But the more we chase it, the further away it seems. And maybe, just maybe, the problem isn't where we're trying to go, but how we're treating ourselves along the way. Today, I want to invite you on a different kind of journey. We're not going to talk about quick fixes or magical solutions. We're going to dive deep into something much more powerful. The union between mindfulness and self-acceptance. Two pillars that, when truly understood, can radically transform the way you relate to yourself. Carl Rogers, one of the great names in humanistic psychology, once said something simple, yet revolutionary. The curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change. It might sound contradictory at first. After all, how can we change if we stop fighting ourselves? But this is exactly where his wisdom meets the heart of mindfulness. Because mindfulness, at its core, isn't about controlling your thoughts. It's about noticing what's happening inside you, right now, and allowing yourself to feel it without judgment. It's about no longer running from your emotions, your story, your discomfort. It's about looking at yourself with the eyes of someone who wants to understand, not condemn. And you know what's most surprising about all of this? That this seemingly passive attitude is actually one of the most powerful forms of transformation there is. Because when you start to see yourself with compassion, change begins to arise naturally. Without inner violence, without relentless pressure, with presence, with respect, with care. Does that make sense to you? Have you ever gone through moments when you tried so hard to change that you ended up losing yourself even more? Maybe it's time to try a different approach. To look inward with courage, but also with kindness. To let go of the idea that you need to be perfect to be worthy. Because here's the truth. You are already enough. Exactly as you are. And it's from that certainty, not of superiority, but of dignity, that genuine change can begin. Not through pressure, but through conscious choice. Not through demand, but through recognition. So take a deep breath, drop your shoulders a bit, and come with me on this journey. Let's explore together how to practice mindfulness not just as a technique, but as a way of living. How to use self-acceptance as an act of resistance against the culture of constant self-criticism. And how, by stopping the fight within, you finally create space to truly grow. Let's take a pause here for a moment. Not just any pause, but the kind where you really take a deep breath and notice how you're feeling right now. You might be tired, you might be anxious, maybe tense, lost, or simply curious. And that's okay, because that's the point, to stop and truly look at yourself without rushing into solutions before acknowledging what's really going on. Carl Rogers spoke a lot about this. He said, "When I am genuinely able to accept myself as I am, then I can become more open to my own experience." What he meant is that, in order to change something within ourselves, we first need to recognize it. We need to stop denying what we feel, what we think, what hurts us. And so often, we don't do that. Instead of looking inward, we become experts at avoiding ourselves. We try to control emotions, erase the bad feelings, repress painful memories, and end up creating a silent but constant inner war. Think of it like carrying a heavy backpack for years. You don't even remember when you first put it on, but it's always there. Sometimes it feels light, other times it aches, but you keep walking with it on your back, believing it's just part of the journey. When in reality, maybe it's time to open the backpack, to look inside, to see what still needs to be carried, and what's just been weighing you down for far too long. That's what mindfulness invites us to do. It's not a technique to empty your mind. It's a practice of filling your heart with presence. It's about stopping the fight against what is already there. It's allowing yourself to feel, to recognize, to accept, and through acceptance, creating space to choose what to do with it. Because self-acceptance doesn't mean giving up on change. It means understanding that true change only happens when it comes from respect for who you are today. Not from hatred for who you think you are. Not from relentless self-criticism, but from a clear and gentle awareness of where you are right now. And that awareness is the beginning of everything. It's like turning on a light in the dark room of your mind. Suddenly you begin to see things that were hidden. Old fears, unhealed wounds, limiting beliefs that were planted deep inside, often without you even realizing it. So I ask you now, what have you been carrying without noticing? What judgments have you been making against yourself that are keeping you from peace? Carl Rogers understood this better than anyone. He saw how many people came to therapy wearing masks, ready to be fixed, expecting someone to repair them. But he knew that the real work wasn't about fixing anyone. It was about creating a space safe enough for each person to discover, on their own, who they already were. And that's what I want to offer you now. A space where you can take off the mask, where you can admit that you're not okay, if that's the case, or recognize that even when everything seems under control, there's a quiet emptiness inside. Because the human mind is like that. It's always searching for connection, for belonging, for a sense of being held. And often the one person who doesn't hold us is ourselves. So take another deep breath, not to pretend everything is fine, but to acknowledge what is. And in doing so, begin treating yourself with the same patience and care you'd offer someone you love. This is the foundation of mindfulness applied to self-acceptance. It's not easy, but it's deeply necessary. Let's talk about something many people carry, but few recognize. How do you treat yourself when you're suffering? Think about that for a moment. When you feel sadness, frustration, anxiety, or fear, what do you do with yourself? Do you try to suppress those emotions? Do you criticize yourself for feeling that way? Do you tell yourself that you should be better, stronger, more centered? It's very common in our culture to associate vulnerability with weakness. And because of that, we repress what hurts. We want to be productive, efficient, always in control. But then a difficult emotion shows up, maybe a bad day, a disappointment, a sense of emptiness, and we panic. We get mad at ourselves for not being able to keep the mask in place. Carl Rogers saw this clearly. He used to say, "The curious paradox is that the individual is more helped by the warm, accepting attitude of the therapist than by any technique." So I ask you, what if you had to be that therapist for yourself? What if, instead of fighting your emotions, you could begin treating them with that same warm humanity? Because mindfulness in practice is exactly that, learning to look inward with eyes that seek to understand, not to condemn. It's realizing that you don't need to be okay all the time to deserve love and respect, that your dignity doesn't depend on performance, that you can go through hard days, feel painful things, and still deserve care, especially from yourself. That might sound simple, but it's not easy. Most of us were raised in a world that glorifies strength, productivity, and achievement. So we learn to treat ourselves with harshness, to demand too much, to mentally punish ourselves for mistakes, failures, or imperfections. And without noticing, we start building a conflicted relationship with ourselves. Have you noticed that? How many times, instead of soothing yourself during a hard moment, do you criticize yourself? How many times, instead of offering relief, do you increase the pressure? Self-acceptance isn't a switch you flip and suddenly everything changes. It's something you build, slowly, with small, daily choices. With moments when you decide to stop fighting yourself. With seconds when you take a deep breath and say, "It's okay, I'm allowed to feel this." And that's where mindfulness comes in. Not as a magical technique, but as a way to train your presence, to practice coming back to yourself, even when it's hard, to create an inner space where you can observe your thoughts, your emotions, your story, without running, without judging, without trying to fix anything right away. It's like forging steel. Each present moment is a strike of the hammer, shaping your emotional resilience. Each conscious pause is a strengthening exercise. Each intentional breath is a quiet reminder, I'm here, and I will treat myself with care. Carl Rogers knew that true change only happens when there is internal safety, when a person feels accepted, heard, understood. And he saw this in therapy. When the environment felt safe, people started revealing their deepest truths. They began to recognize themselves. They began to allow themselves to grow. That's what I want to create here with you now. A space where you can stop for a bit, where you can acknowledge that it's not always easy, that sometimes you feel lost, and that all of this is part of being human. and that even so, you are capable of looking at yourself with kindness. So take another deep breath, feel your body, feel your heart, and ask yourself, how can I treat myself with more care today? Let's talk about something you might already be asking yourself. Okay, I get the idea of self-acceptance. I understand the concept of mindfulness, but how do I bring that into my real life? How do I stop fighting with myself when I'm tired, overwhelmed, or lost? That's an important question, because understanding alone isn't enough. What truly changes us is what we live. And living mindfulness and self-acceptance isn't just about having a beautiful idea in your mind. It's about practice, daily practice. Sometimes through small gestures, sometimes through silent but deep choices. Carl Rogers spoke often about the importance of the environment in the process of change. He said that when people are met with empathy, understanding, and respect, they begin to truly reveal themselves. And what's most interesting is that he didn't see this only as the therapist's role. He believed each of us can be that safe environment for ourselves. So how do you create that kind of internal space in your everyday life? It starts with small, conscious pauses. With moments where you take a deep breath and simply notice where you are. Not to change anything, at least not right away, but to recognize, to notice how you are right now. Is there tension in your body? Are your thoughts racing? Are emotions being pushed down? For example, imagine you're at work and anxiety starts rising. Your thoughts get faster, you start feeling pressure, telling yourself you won't be able to handle it. At that moment, you have two options. You either enter a cycle of internal pressure, or you take a short but real pause. You breathe. You say to yourself, "This is happening. I feel it coming. I can acknowledge this without getting lost in it." That is applied mindfulness. It's being present with what is happening without running away. And it's also an act of self-acceptance because you're not judging yourself for feeling that way. You're allowing yourself to feel while gently reminding yourself that you are still here, still capable of choosing how to respond. Another daily practice is to observe your inner dialogue. So often, the way we speak to ourselves is brutal. We're harsher with ourselves than we would ever be with someone we love. So try this. The next time you're criticizing yourself, pause and replace that inner voice with the voice of someone who truly loves you, someone who cares. What would that person say to you right now? It's amazing how sometimes just shifting the tone of the internal conversation can make a huge difference. It doesn't make the problem disappear, but it creates a gentler space in which to face it. And here's something else that's powerful. Stop expecting change to happen overnight. Carl Rogers knew this better than anyone. He said, "I begin to recognize that I am enough just as I am." And that sentence may sound simple, but it carries a quiet revolution. Because most of us live our lives trying to reach some future version of ourselves where we'll finally be worthy of self-acceptance. A version where we're calmer, more productive, more balanced. Then we'll treat ourselves with kindness. But the truth is, acceptance doesn't come after. It comes first. It's not the reward, it's the foundation. So let's go back to the beginning. How can you start treating yourself with more care today? Not after you're more disciplined, more organized, more centered. Today. Exactly as you are, with your emotions, your scars, your doubts, because you don't need to become someone else to be worthy of kindness. You just need to remember that you already are. Let's talk about something that might seem obvious, but that we often ignore. Change doesn't happen somewhere in the distant future. It begins here, now. In this very moment, as you breathe, as you listen to these words, maybe even recognizing yourself in them. Because self-acceptance isn't a goal to reach. It's a daily choice, a courageous gesture. To look at yourself without masks, to acknowledge your emotions, your limits, your story, and still decide that you are worthy of care. Carl Rogers understood this better than anyone. He once said, "I find myself capable of looking at myself with respect and acceptance." A simple sentence, but profoundly revolutionary. Because really, how many of us can truly look inward without judgment? How many of us actually stop to listen to what we feel instead of trying to suppress it? Most of us were raised to seek external validation, to prove our worth through achievements, degrees, likes, approval from others, and in the process, we distanced ourselves from who we are. We learned to fight our emotions, deny our weaknesses, over-criticize ourselves, punish ourselves for making mistakes. But mindfulness is this: returning home to yourself, reconnecting with your own heart, with your own humanity, and in doing so, beginning to realize that you don't need to change who you are to be worthy of love and respect. You already are. And that realization in itself is transformative. Because when you start treating yourself with kindness, life begins to flow differently. You don't give up on your goals, you don't abandon your dreams, but you move forward with more lightness, more clarity, more presence. You begin to understand that you don't have to feel okay all the time. That anxiety, sadness, frustration, they're part of being alive. And even in those difficult emotions, you can still treat yourself gently. You can stop fighting yourself. You can learn to welcome what comes without running away. It's like walking through a storm. Before, you tried to fight the wind. You ran for cover, blamed yourself for being scared, pushed yourself to be strong. Now you can choose to stand there in the rain and say, "This is hard, but I'm here. I will hold on. I will care for myself as this passes." That is true strength, not the absence of pain, but the ability to be present in it, to acknowledge what hurts without turning away, to look at yourself with compassion even when life is heavy. And that's what I want to leave with you today. An invitation to keep walking this path, to go deeper into yourself, to practice small, conscious pauses, to replace self-criticism with curiosity, to trade pressure for presence. Because you are already enough, exactly as you are. And from that certainty, real change becomes possible. Not out of pressure, but out of conscious choice. Not from internal violence, but from genuine care. If something here today resonated with you, if you saw a part of yourself in these words, if you felt this is a path you want to continue exploring, then I invite you to go further, to subscribe to this channel, because personal growth isn't about selling illusions. It's about offering a clear, deep human mirror, a place where you can see yourself with courage, with patience, with kindness. So if this touched you, if it made sense to you, I'll see you in the next conversation. Let's keep walking this path together. No rush, no false promises, no magic formulas. Just truth, presence, and care. Until next time, and thank you for being here.